Hello， 大家好，又係我高B哥啊！係時間提醒大家飲水啦，增添智慧，增添水分，智慧如水啊！好啦，嚟到錄片時間，2022年嘅11月29號晚上嘅11點鐘啊！好啦，高B哥咧一陣間咧會放影片出嚟咧，係呢位畫面上邊啊，白宮嘅國安發言人啊柯比，佢咧一個咧記者會裏邊嘅對話，咁我將佢咧斬開咗幾段唔同嘅。咁啊，你會睇到咧，西方個媒體咧點樣咧去問問題啦，同埋咧引導啦，帶住咧呢一個發言人啊柯比咧，想佢咧代入佢哋嗰啲陷阱嗰度，繼而咧可以咧俾佢哋咧憑佢講嘅嘢咧有一啲蛛絲馬跡啊，或者講出嚟嘅説話咧帶咗個風向，跟住咧希望咧 worsen 件事啊，所謂 worsen 佢即係惡化件事，等佢哋咧繼續可以攞嚟操作嗱，呢啲就係媒體啦啊。OK， 大家咧睇下咧媒體係點樣去引帶佢嘅，好唔好啊
On a different topic, I was hoping, what is the White House's message, the president's message to people in China who are peacefully protesting COVID lockdowns there? And then did the topic of China's zero COVID policy come up in the president's bilateral meeting with President Xi when they met in Indonesia a couple weeks ago?
They did talk about COVID and the effect that the pandemic had around the world. Clearly that came up inside the conversation. I don't know if specifically the zero COVID policy was an issue of discussion, but certainly COVID was on the agenda, as you might expect that it would be. And our message to peaceful protesters around the world is the same and consistent. People should be allowed the right to assemble and to peacefully protest policies or laws or dictates that they take issue with.
Does the White House support their efforts to sort of regain personal freedoms in light of these lockdowns?
The White House supports the right of peaceful protest.
嗱，好啦，翻嚟啦。嗱，首先咧第一段大家見到啊，嗱記者咧不停喺度追問緊咧，即係想講嘅，美國係點樣支持咧？而家咧佢哋嗰啲示威遊行暴動嘅嘢啦，跟住咧又再問啦，總統啊點樣咧去支持佢啦？好啦，喂，但係你見唔見到咧？呢個白宮國安發言人啊柯比咧答得好穩陣，佢而家同你講嘅就係佢好針對有一個字眼叫做和平示威者 ，OK？ 佢去到咧頭先個片段嘅尾最後講多一次，佢都話我哋支持和平嘅示威者。佢強調就話美國嘅價值觀裏邊認為咧人們咧係有權發聲嘅。但係喺和平嘅情況之下嚇，所以咧佢咧第二次再答咧就話我哋支持嘅咧係和平示威者 ，OK？ 跟住佢落嚟咧，我有第二段，跟住我俾大家睇咗先，跟住再同大家講下 ，OK？ 嚟片。
On China, guys, is it the U.S.'s assessment that these protests we've seen are widespread, or are they perhaps more isolated incidents that are being amplified by social media?
I don't think that we know a whole lot more about the geographic location, size, scale, and scope of them than what you're learning as well through social media and through traditional media. It's not like we have, I think, a finer sense of insight than what's already out there in the public sphere. So I don't have a sense of that.
In that realm, the statement you issued, or that was issued earlier today, didn't include any explicit calls for China to stop detaining and harming protesters and journalists. Why not?
We're watching this closely, as you might expect we would. And again, we continue to stand up and support the right of peaceful protest. And I think we're going to watch this closely, and we'll see where things go.
On China again, John, is it the U.S.'s assessment that there's any sort of risk to the U.S. economy or the U.S. supply chain because of the protests?
We don't see any particular impact right now to the supply chain as a result of these protests.
And then on the vaccines, has the U.S. offered any U.S.-made vaccines, coronavirus vaccines, to China, the mRNA vaccines?
We have not offered any to China at this time. As you know, we are the largest supplier of COVID vaccines around the world, and we have not received any requests or any interest by China to receive our vaccines.
好啦，嗱，第二段咧，你見到媒體咧開始點樣去質佢？ 第二段一開始就問咧，喂係唔係咧嗰啲 social media 啊，網上嗰啲平台啊，或者咧特登咧擺上去嗰啲片咧，作大咗、誇大咗嗰個危險性啊、嗰個事件啊，去引導嗰啲事情啊咁樣。嗱咁呢個咧就係試佢嘅，因為咧睇下會唔會究竟呢個國家行為，又或者咧國家話唔係啊，我哋其實咧收到個情報翻嚟咧係好嚴重嘅。我哋而家影到嘅只係冰山一角，又或者係啊，我哋都聽到翻嚟咧，據當地嘅消息來源咧，都幾嚴重下。又或者咧唔係咁樣講啦，就用國家嘅層面去講，佢又答得好穩陣喎。我哋而家唔知道當地嘅狀況啊、規模啊、所有成嘅喎，好似咧將自己咧置身事外咁啊，係咪啊？嗱呢個咧完完全全咧避風險避得好叻。好啦，咁跟住又問咯，咁喂，我哋又唔俾啲疫苗人哋？喂，人哋講咗啦，我哋雖然係咧全世界最大嘅疫苗生產國，但係中國本身都有好多噶嘛，係咪？佢冇要求過我哋攞喎。咁呢個咧又係一度第三樣嘗試啦，就係話咧，喂，你美國咧就同中國咧因為疫苗之爭搞到而家咁樣嘅狀況。嗱，記者咧係一步一步、亦步亦趨咁樣咧去咧就想製造事端嘅。咁啊，其實咧今次咧坦白講，我咧都要俾個手指公咧呢個咧白宮國安發言人啊柯比啊，佢認真應付得唔錯噶，即係佢今次呢個記者招待會咧嘅對答咧好穩陣，而且咧佢好強調到咧美國只係呢個叫做幫助咧，唔係幫助，係支持嗰啲咧叫做和平嘅示威者，佢好突顯到出嚟嘅。所以咧你見唔到咧美國今次嘅媒體或者西方嘅媒體咧可以喺度咧大做文章。嗱，呢啲咧就係佢哋點樣同媒體咧一種咧配合啦。如果佢想你寫大佢嘅時候咧，佢會放啲料出嚟俾佢寫大佢。佢唔想你放大件事咧，佢特登答得好穩陣，滴水不漏，等你咧冇得放大佢。咁啊，所以咧呢件事咧應該10成9咧都係同阿拜登同阿習主席咧見面嗰樣嘢有關嘅，承諾裏邊有關嘅，又或者背後咧衰到咧打人彈嘢咧真係美國做嘅。不過咧白宮都唔知嘅，都未定嘅，係 CMA 自己搞嘅，又唔定嘅。唔好講太多陰謀論嚇，因為我唔係話陰謀論，而係咧的而且確咧呢幾樣嘢咧都有可能性㗎。咁啊，只係俾大家咧多一個思考啫。OK， 好啦，嗱，跟住嚟呢條片咧長少少㗎，但係咧我想你哋睇一睇咧記者點樣一步一步咁樣去質問咧阿柯比，咁你又會見到平時咧佢哋咧係點樣應對啊？啲記者亦都會特登點樣兜圈啊？跟住咧就將啲嘢咧，好似咧有啲意識形態上嘅咧，落去白宮嗰度，要個發言人咧答咧 yes no，變成咧就好似咧嗰個講法就係由白宮講出嚟咁。其實嗰段説話咧原本根本咧係記者嘅口中講嘅，白宮咧只係答 yes no 嘅啫。咁但係就好大鑊㗎啦，咁會墮入佢哋嘅圈套啦。好吧，我哋睇呢條片先再講。OK， 去片。
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Again on China. You just noted that you're watching this closely, as we might expect. Could you give us a sense of how much the president is engaging with this issue? Is he watching it personally, getting updated more than on maybe some other things?
The president is staying briefed on what's going on inside China. Yes.
Closely briefed on this?
Anytime.
I mean, just having an impression of like where
I've never been in the room where he wasn't like closely briefed. I mean, he's staying atop on what's going on. He's monitoring this. We all are. So yes, the president is certainly staying mindful of the protest activity.
Okay, thank you.
Alex Rivera.
Thanks, Kareem. Thank you, John. I sort of assume that the United States supports peaceful protest around the world. That, with all due respect, doesn't strike, I would think, most people as a novel position. The question is...
Well, I'm glad that it's not a novel position. It's exactly where we should be.
But the president has explicitly drawn a contrast between autocracy and democracy here and also abroad. Isn't this a moment, obviously without getting into some sort of grand conflict, to sort of assert the rights of people advocating for freedom and democracy more forcefully than perhaps we have?
This is, I think, a moment to reassert what we believe in when it comes to free assembly and peaceful protest, and we've done that, and we'll continue to do that, whether it's people protesting in Iran or China or anywhere else around the world. Nothing's changed about the president's firm belief in the power of democracy and democratic institutions and how important that is. But this is really a moment, to put it back into your words, this is a moment for the Chinese people and the Chinese government to speak to. We have been nothing but clear and consistent, and I think you'll see that going forward.
So just to follow up, John, on the China issue, why is the White House's line that everybody has the right to peacefully protest and not the U.S. thinks it's bad to lock people up in their houses to stop COVID?
We've made it clear, Peter, that a lockdown is not a policy that we're going to support here. We've come a long way over these last 3 years. Hard to believe, 3 years in terms of treating COVID and preventing COVID. So we've said, a lockdown is not a policy that we support here. But obviously there are people in China that have concerns about that, and they're protesting that, and we believe they should be able to do that peacefully.
One more on China. How concerned is the president that China's zero COVID strategy and that these restrictions may be inhibiting the economic recovery globally and here at home?
The president believes, and he's said this many times, COVID absolutely has had an impact on the global economy. Certainly it's had an impact on supply chains and resources around the world. And that's why the president wants to move the United States as quickly and as efficiently as we can through COVID so that even our economy can get more on track than it already is becoming now. It is having a global effect, but what is also having a very acute, significant global impact on the economy is the war in Ukraine. And that's why we're trying to go after a price cap on Russian oil. That's why we're trying to give Ukraine the tools and capabilities they need to succeed on the battlefield so that this war can end. It can end in a way in which Ukraine can be whole and sovereign and free. So there's a lot of impacts on the global economy. It's not just about COVID.
But beyond just COVID generally, does he think that China's zero COVID strategy, that these restrictions are inhibiting the economic recovery?
The president recognizes that in many countries around the world, COVID is still an issue. And certainly, to the degree that it inhibits a country's ability to conduct commerce, it's having an impact on the world. And China is a huge economic competitor out there. But I wouldn't get into parsing the dollar figure effect here of the remaining challenge of COVID in China. But clearly, China as a major economic player, and China still struggling with COVID, there's an impact on the economy.
Thank you. Two quick questions, one on China and then on Ukraine. I'm wondering, what is the president's reaction when he hears protesters in China chant freedom or Xi Jinping step down?
The president's not going to speak for protesters around the world. They're speaking for themselves.
So there's no reaction?
These protesters are speaking for themselves. What we are doing is making it clear that we support the right of peaceful protest.
Yes, sir. There are some concrete steps moving the relationship forward in terms of a bilateral basis after the meeting between President Biden and Xi.
Right.
Is there any concern, or will those steps have any effect on how the U.S. responds to any Chinese response to the protests that are currently ongoing?
I think we're going to have to watch this going forward, Phil. What I can tell you is, as you and I are talking today, there's been no change to our desire to continue to see these channels of communication stay open. And we were heartened coming away from the G20 that both leaders were able to agree on getting some of these working levels.
好啦，翻嚟啦。嗱，跟住最尾呢一段咧，我冇 cut 噶啦，特登咧留翻長啲咧俾大家睇下。咁咧裏邊咧有好幾個 message， 去到最尾嗰段咧，你聽唔聽到佢講嘅就係話，即係佢咧好似咧已經差唔多解釋咗俾你哋聽噶啦。喂，係咪因為咧兩國嘅壓力啊，或者你見完面啊，所以咁樣？佢話我哋要確保咧我哋嘅溝通渠道，尤其是咧喺工作層面啊或者高層嗰個層面嗰度咧，保持住嗰個溝通渠道嘅暢順咧，係非常之咁重要嘅。嗱，咁呢個咧，成個記者招待會去到呢一段咧，應該咧就係重點重心，好多人想知嘅嘢嚟㗎啦。OK， 頭先講嗰啲咧係一啲操作嚟嘅。啊，點解話支唔支持佢哋啊？搞唔搞意識形態啊？我哋幫你報啊？點？咦， 講嚟講去好似唔係好想喐喎，唔係好遠喎，唔好用質啊中國喎，咁點啊？淨係所謂支持咧呢個和平嘅示威者啊，我哋去到邊度都係啊，伊朗如是，邊度如是，係和平嘅示威者啊，一定要記住係和平啊。當你一唔和平，佢都已經唔支持你噶啦。OK， 咁你講得好清楚喎。原來去到最尾佢解釋咗㗎，佢一定要保持住咧雙方能夠有溝通嘅渠道，呢個先至係重點。好啦，嗱咁啊，大家咧將整個記者嘅發問咧串連起上嚟咧，你就會見到咧平時嘅記者咧係點樣咧去用咩嘅模式啊、方向啊，跟住咧去問嗰個發言人。其實今日咧已經咧係好輕鬆㗎啦。上個禮拜咧嗰個皮亞斯咧嗰位咧黑人嘅女性咧，咁嗱雖然佢係女性啊，但係佢本身唔係淨係女性㗎嚇。OK， 咁啊大家明我講咩啦？好啦，咁佢咧就好惹火啦。上次咧就啱啱咧福奇醫生咧係最後一次出席咧白宮嗰個咧答問大會，因為跟住落嚟咧佢就退休嘅。咁啊佢係非常惹火同埋火爆，就同記者咧開片咁滯啊，口角啫，唔係喐手啊，口角 OK。咁同今日呢個氣氛咧係爭好遠嘅。今日呢個氣氛咧相對嚟講緩和之餘咧就保守咗嘅。咁但係白宮記者咧，因為咧唔係人都做得嘅，咁啊喺呢個記者行業咧要有翻相關咁嘅經歷啦，同埋資歷啦。咁跟住咧白宮咧就會咧特別咧審批，可能咧就因為咧你要入去每日都喺裏邊咧，佢哋對你個品格審查相對比較嚴謹啲嗬。咁佢就會做埋呢啲嘢先俾你做。咁所以咧好多嘅所謂白宮記者咧一做咧喺裏邊咧係做10幾年甚至乎幾十年㗎。咁同咧每一屆差唔多佢哋嗰啲白宮官員啦或者政府嘅人物咧，好熟絡㗎。所以你見佢哋咧全部咧，雖然咧外國人都真係咁樣稱呼嘅，見到咧佢個大舅父或者三姨媽咧，佢都係叫佢個名嘅啫。所以你又見到頭先講阿 John、阿 Phil 咁樣嗰啲咧好似好親切咁。實際上亦都係真嘅，可能根本識咗好耐都唔定㗎啦。又或者咧佢哋自己當然啦都係簡稱啊，或者咧就係即係輕鬆啲啦。嗱，無論如何啊，高 B 哥咧今日呢個影片咧係想俾大家睇下記者行業、媒體行業咧係點樣咧將嗰個資料咧透過白宮嗰度攞出嚟，繼而咧就睇下點樣去作故仔。嗱，今日呢個咧相對嚟講唔係一個好嘅教材，係因為咧佢答得好叻啊，好滴水不漏啊。咁有冇對嗰個經濟有影響？咁有 Covid， 即係有新冠，自然就有影響㗎啦，係咪？咁而家的而且確新冠對於中國大陸嚟講都係帶俾佢困擾嘅喎，即係佢自己都想爭啲幫佢講埋就話，咁人哋都有受害㗎嘛，人哋都唔想呃咁，咁所以你話冇係假嘅。再加埋中國本身嘅經濟體量咁大，係全球第2大經濟體，咁佢有影響，咪即係全球有影響咯。呢啲咁樣嘅答法咧，冇嘢可以質到你啊！個記者唔知點樣寫，點寫都寫唔到落去，係嘛？所以呢啲答法咧好穩陣㗎，呢啲咧就高級嘅一啲咧外交辭令，就唔係咧好似阿杜魯多咁樣又再重複機械人咁。我哋會秉持住咧公開啊、公平啊、公正啊嗰個所有嘢咧話晒俾你哋聽㗎。黐線，連佢自己加拿大啲政客都話：唔好講廢話啦，大家都知唔係㗎啦呢啲嘢。連佢哋自己加拿大啲政客都咁講啊！好啦，咁啊嗱，大家可以咧透過今日呢個影片咧有一個學習啊。OK，咁我見到咧即係呢個影片，我覺得反而咧唔好用呢個咩點樣質佢個角度啊，咩美國總統唔為任何嘅示威者去代言啊咁樣，而係咧反而咧去欣賞同埋學習咧，究竟記者點樣發問，同埋咧白宮發言人咧係點樣回答呢個咧，反而對我哋咧可能有所裨益㗎。好啦，講到呢度，晏啲再見。我自豪因我多角度思考，拜拜。